Every person has to find their own meaning in life, which is like the blooming of an inner flower. The meaning of life isn't out there in doing things or achieving great feats. It's within each person, accessible to everyone. There's an old Indian tale that says the gods gave very different gifts to each person, but they gave everyone the same capacity for happiness and fulfillment. That's what we're going to talk about in The Secret of the Golden Flower. Welcome, everyone, to our lecture. Today we're going to talk about a continuation of the teachings from The Secret of the Golden Flower. I say a continuation because a while back we did a lecture on this topic, and it was a lecture that got a lot of views and a lot of comments. I'm really happy and excited because I personally like this topic a lot. I consider this book very special. So we decided to record a second part with some other teachings that we didn't have time to cover in the first lecture we did a while ago. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, especially, those things that we can call the confirming experiences of the path, and by that I mean, how to know if a person is really on this path of development. The Secret of the Golden Flower is a very special work. It's about a Chinese text that was commented on by Jung, and it talks about this movement of the blooming of an inner seed, a spiritual seed that every person carries within themselves. I'm going to briefly go over with you in our lecture today what this golden flower is, so we can move on and talk about the other teachings. Well, Jung, who was the founder of analytical psychology, considered this book to be very important, very special for him, because he was at a point in his research, in the development of his theories, where he had a lot of clarity about the perception of a center within a person, which is what he called the self, meaning a center, a human essence, and that the great achievement of a person is really to get in touch with and develop, bring into life, this which is their own being. But even though he had a lot of clarity about this from his own life experience and from working with his various patients, he didn't have any theory or backing on it, and nothing he had come across. And no theory, no culture, no tradition. So he didn't really know what to do, how he could actually build a science based on something that he perceived to be very clear, but that he had never seen anywhere else or anyone talking about. And it was around this time that he came across, through a great friend, a manuscript of the Chinese text called The Secret of the Golden Flower. And he said that for him, the moment he got in touch with it, he realized it talked exactly about this process he himself was perceiving, and how beautiful, how enchanting it was, and how it was the answer to everything he needed. This realization that the search for the center of oneself is the great goal of the human psyche. So he mentions that in this text, he finds a way back into the world to put his theories back into the world. It's important to realize that all cultures, in some way, talk about a method to reach the self. There's a method for this, and each culture makes its contribution. The Secret of the Golden Flower is one of those methods. So, what does the Secret of the Golden Flower tell us? Every human being has a small seed inside them. We can see it as a small seed, that is, something that they have in potential, a spiritual essence that is latent within them. And the natural course of life is that as the flow of life goes on, this little seed starts to sprout, so it begins to bloom through life. That would be the natural way. Human fulfillment would be exactly letting this flow of life continue, meaning letting your inner seed sprout, becoming more and more ourselves. That's what's called the circular movement of light in the Chinese text. In other words, the light expands in life. That light inside becomes more and more intense, and it keeps revealing itself more and more in life. The end of this movement, the goal of this movement, is the blossoming of the human being. All the potentials that were dormant so far become evident in life. That's what we call the individual, this golden flower that blooms. It's really interesting because in today's society, we're always chasing our fulfillment, usually by doing a whole bunch of different things. So we have a model of what this fulfilled human being would be like. You have to do certain things to achieve fulfillment. You have to meet certain goals within society. They tell us what brings true happiness, true fulfillment. Everyone's chasing these things, and deep down, we look at people and it seems like no one's really happy. No one's truly fulfilled. And what this work, The Secret of the Golden Flower, is showing us is that fulfillment and happiness don't depend on anything external, nothing outside of a person. It's all within. It's simply about connecting with this luminous principle, with this spiritual seed inside each person and letting it sprout, letting it come to the surface, come through life. In other words, happiness isn't something complex. It's something, actually, very, very simple. We're the ones who choose to complicate things every now and then. Actually, it's about what we commonly say about putting our heart into things, giving the best of ourselves to make it the most essential part in every little thing we do. Putting our love, beauty, and sensitivity. In other words, putting the best of the human being. So, when we do that, you can notice that the moments we experience are really special. It's like we're getting into the flow of life, wanting to bring this inner light out into the world. It's like the opposite movement of what a photographer does. The photographer, he makes the light come into the camera lens so that it imprints an image. The picture. So it imprints an image through the light it receives from outside. What we want to do is the opposite. We want a light that comes from within to reach things and infuse the things we're interacting with. That would be the circular movement of the light. And this is also the sprouting of the seed, which is how we're calling it. That will give rise to this golden flower that can bloom from every human being. You see, a lot of times we're so mechanical in our experiences, so mechanical in life in general, that we don't even know which experience in our day makes us happier. If we were to reflect, for example, today, what was the moment I really felt happy? Sometimes we don't remember. But if we stop to make this observation, and it's a great reflection for us too, if we stop to see, usually the things that made us happier, not euphoric, but happy, with a certain inner fullness, are those simple things we do, but we do them with our heart. Putting ourselves into it, those things that make us feel more fulfilled. And when a person doesn't get into this flow of life, meaning they're not trying to awaken that seed within them, what happens is life usually feels unsatisfying, boring. They always feel like something's missing. The experiences are never as good as they'd like them to be, and they feel like something's always missing. Nothing is really accomplished. Something's missing. And when something's missing, what do? Usually, we'll look for more and more things to do outside ourselves. So it's a movement that never stops outward. Something's always missing. The person is always looking for more outside. So there always has to be something new, different things. Something always has to change. Why? Because something still hasn't filled the void. The problem is, she wouldn't need to keep looking outside herself so much. She wouldn't need to look for any of that. The only thing needed is to look inside. And even that little seed, your heart, expressing more of your own light through life, through your experiences. Carl Jung himself, he mentions that by observing his various patients, he noticed that many of these pains, these psychic pains that humans feel, he says it's exactly that. There's something that pushes to be born within us. Humans have the seed inside that's constantly pushing to bring forth the self, as he called it, and many times we try to live a life forgetting about it. Trying to live a life full of things that have nothing to do with our own soul, with our own human essence. And the thing is, it wants to be born because it wants to follow a flow. He says it's like a woman who's pregnant, for example, who feels the labor pains, but she doesn't want to let the child be born. So that can cause such great pain for that person that it might even kill them. That's exactly how we are, humans, when we don't want to let our seed come to the surface. And so we start feeling a lot of pain that comes from that as well. Well, there's an excerpt I brought for you all for us to read and talk a bit about, which I find very beautiful, very special. It's not from this book, The Secret of the Golden Flower. It's from another book of his, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, but it explains exactly this. It explains exactly this context. What he puts as this big question that can make a person feel fulfilled or leave them always dissatisfied and anxious with their life. And that's exactly the decisive point. He comments the following. For man, the decisive question is this. Do you or do you not relate to the infinite? The infinite means this immortal essence that's inside every human being, this seed we were talking about. Do you refer to the infinite or not? Do you have contact with your inner seed or not? That's the big question. This is the criterion of your life. If I know that the infinite is essential, then I do not let myself get caught up in trivialities and things that are not fundamental. I don't get into social conventions. If I ignore it, I insist that the world recognize some value in me for this or that quality that I consider a personal possession, my talents, my beauty, perhaps. The more a man emphasizes a false possession, the less he can feel the essential and the more unsatisfying life will seem to him. He feels limited because his intentions are constrained, and from this arise envy and jealousy. If we understand and feel that in this life we're already connected to the infinite, our desires and attitudes change. Ultimately, we are only worth something because of the essential. And if we don't access it, life has been wasted. In other words, either we affirm ourselves in what we truly are, this infinite he talks about, or we start trying to fulfill ourselves through personal projections, and life ends up, always, feeling frustrated. We start feeling pain, like life isn't enough, that it's never exactly what we wanted, that we're not appreciated, and so on. From a human perspective, if life didn't have a connection with itself, if through life a person didn't have contact with their spiritual seed, life, as Carl Jung says here, was nothing but wasted. It would be worth exactly for that. The most common thing is exactly that. Everyone looks for their fulfillment, their happiness in social expectations, and how they're valued by others. But by doing that, they drift further away from themselves. They move away from their inner seed. And humans didn't come into this life to do things, to create works, to achieve feats, or to be valued. Man came into this life to have a connection with himself. He came into this life to make that seed he carries inside him sprout. And if you don't do that, life will be wasted. In other words, that's the decisive question. So, to better understand what this golden flower we're seeking is, let's dive into some of the other teachings from the book. We are going to start with a very special teaching called Action in Non-Action. I'm going to read this part with you. These verses are very mysterious. Their meaning is as follows. The most important, in a broad sense, are the 4 words, in non-action, action. And that's it. In non-action, there is action. This is one of the things that Carl Jung said was one of the most beautiful, mysterious, and profound things he ever encountered in traditions. This idea that in non-action there is action. Let's understand a bit better what this means. Look, usually when we're acting, we're most of the time motivated by some sort of desire. How's this going to benefit me? How am I going to get an advantage? How can this person be useful to me as well? In other words, we're always acting either out of fear or desire or an expectation, usually motivated like that. The big secret that it talks about here in this part of the secret of the golden flower is, in non-action, action means take away the desire, not the action. Remove that motivation of desire and still act. In non-action, action. This concept is what in the East they're used to calling right action. In other words, an action without attachment to the outcome. An action you don't do because you're wanting something, or because you have some expectation, or because you're hoping to get some personal gain. No, an action completely free of desires, but at the same time it's a very strong and deeply committed action with life. If a person doesn't act out of desire, the big question is, what do they act for? It's what we usually call an action out of duty, meaning an action because you want to participate in life, an action because you want to be life itself, because you enjoy life, because you love life. It means that a person who lives this, or at least is trying to live it, because it's a very complex, very deep concept, but who is trying to live this idea of in non-action, action, wants to minimize their desires as much as possible. be present in each moment, and simply wants to contribute to life wherever they are, to add to life. It means that life, with all its expressions, which is so vast, yes, it needs something at every moment. For example, if I walk by a plant and the plant is wilted, I might contribute to life. If I put a little water on the plant, I want to boost its life. If I walk into a place and it's messy, disorganized, I want to harmonize it. I want to add a little bit more beauty, which is one of life's attributes. It's a way of noticing a need and wanting to collaborate with life. If I come across someone who's sad, I want to cheer them up. I want them to have a bit more of life. If I come across someone who's worried, I want to help them. I want to take away some of their worries. That is, I want to contribute to life, add to life, wherever I am. Without desire, being in each experience and noticing it, being sensitive to what life needs from me. So, in non-action, action. A person who lives like this feels very fulfilled and never gets anxious, disappointed, or frustrated with anything that happens to them because they have no desire. They're not holding on to expectations. What frustrates us is exactly our desire and our expectations. She lives in the present moment, trying to understand what life asks of her at every moment. This is a good exercise for us. Do this a little bit, to some extent. For example, if we go to a new place, if we're going to take part in a life experience, then you go to this place and don't go thinking about how it's going to be, what you'd like, what you'd expect. Try to go completely without desire, completely without expectation, just living in the present moment. You know why? Because when we create an expectation, reality is never going to match exactly the expectation we created. Because we can't really imagine how life is, what the reality of things is like. So you'll feel, if you keep building up a lot of expectations, that things never turn out exactly how you thought they would. Was something missing? Could so-and-so have appreciated me more? Could they have treated me a certain way? Could something have happened and it didn't? Could they have valued me some way? I'll always feel like something's missing in life. The best way to be in an experience, in the present moment, is without desire. Whatever life presents to you, it's beautiful. What life presents to you, you'll live as a unique experience that will never repeat itself, but without desire. This is a very, very special teaching. As Carl Jung himself said, one of the most special, most interesting things he ever came across. And look, his study was very, very extensive. And that we can get to know like this in this way, which in fact is very simple and at the same time very hard to live by. Well, of course, it's not simple to live without desire. We're not in that position right now, but a little more, a few moments where I can reduce the desire a bit and try to act a little more out of love for life, to contribute to life. We'll already notice it makes a huge, huge, huge difference. It's an exercise, like I said. Anyone can try to do it. When you go to, another example, when you go to a place or have the chance to take part in some life experience, never keep asking yourself, what am I going to get? What am I going to gain from this? No, let's try to flip it and ask a different question. How can I take part in this? How can I take part in life? Not what I can gain from life. Change this logic a bit. And it says that this action, this way of life too, in non-action, the action is what helps generate this circular movement of light. We're going to talk a bit now about the experiences that confirm the path. In other words, besides showing us what this golden flower is, what this flow of life is, this circular movement of light, the secret of the golden flower, also talks about how we confirm this. In other words, how to confirm if a human being is truly awakening, blossoming the seed of spirituality that's within them. Because spirituality, it's not something subjective, it's something very objective. That's why we can talk through confirming experiences. It means you can see it in practice, in actions, you can notice its results. It's important for you to understand that these excerpts we're going to discuss now, I'm going to read and comment on with you. They are excerpts from the original Chinese manuscript, The Secret of the Golden Flower. They're no longer the comments by Carl Jung. So, they're symbolic. It's a very symbolic language. And for sure, there are many keys to interpretation, and we're going to talk about some of them, which can teach us how to recognize if in our lives we're moving towards awakening this little seed, this blossoming of the golden flower that resides in the human heart. So let's start by talking about the first excerpt. when during silence, the spirit is constantly filled with a great euphoria, as if it were intoxicated or coming out of a bath. This is a sign that the luminous principle is in harmony throughout the body. Then, the golden flower is already in bud. Later, when all the openings are calm and the silver moon is in the middle of the sky, and there is the impression that the great earth is a world of light and clarity, this is a sign that the body of the heart opens to lucidity. This is the sign that the golden flower blooms. Look, here it's talking about what the life of a person who reached this level of wisdom and truly connected with their own being would be like. It doesn't mean a person who knows they have a spiritual seed inside them. It means a person who has seen it, someone who has had contact with this. This brings an openness, a strength, and depth in all aspects of life. That's what's being represented here when it talks in our text about this euphoria, or this state like coming out of a bath. In other words, a state of great vitality, lots of energy, lots of renewal. That's how a person is who has contact with their own being, a real connection with their own heart, not just knowing it exists, but having direct contact with that point within themselves, with their own center. It's like this, always energized. It's a person who brings life to everything they touch. I mean, things in their presence become better. They fill everything with love, sensitivity, beauty. In other words, everything becomes more alive. You see, there are people who, wherever they go, drag the life out of things, leaving everything worse than they found it. And there are people who, wherever they go, always make things better than they found them, whether it's people, environments, emotional states, or ideas in a certain space. Wherever they go, things get better. It means bringing life to everything. When a person, just to give us a bit of contrast, when a person is mechanical in the things they do, you can notice that things get worse every day as they do. A job that someone does mechanically, after a while, it's worse than when they started. In other words, it drains the life out of everything. And a person like that, someone deep, they bring light to everything they touch. Even the simplest things in life that she might be doing, everything becomes so bright, everything becomes beautiful, everything becomes enchanting for everyone. Whether it's very simple things like making a meal, organizing a space, or dealing with a complex problem that someone has to handle, everything she puts herself into becomes enchanting. It turns out different from what anyone else would do. In other words, she's a channel of life. She's a channel of light. Just like the moon that reflects a light that isn't its own, this person starts to reflect a light that isn't theirs. It's life itself. It's the inner self. She's simply being a channel for it. So everything around her becomes bright and alive too. It's one of the symbols that, for example, a way I really like to see this symbol is in Pinocchio with the blue fairy. The blue fairy is exactly that. She's the one who gives life to what didn't have life before. A person like that, in touch with their heart, does exactly what the blue fairy does. Brings everything to life. People want to be around her because everyone feels happier, everyone gains more depth, sees more beauty. So, she brings things to life. That's exactly what she does with Pinocchio. It wasn't her who made Pinocchio, but it was the blue fairy who gave him life. That's how we want to be with everything around us. To be able to give a little more life, a little more beauty, a little more love, a little more of our enthusiasm and our joy. This silver moon, which is mentioned here in our text too, is this idea of the full moon. In other words, this idea of the moon of matter, because the moon is always symbolically linked to matter, but with its maximum intensity of light. It's our life here in our concrete world, but with the maximum intensity of light that a human being can reveal. In other words, the full moon is the individual. It's a sign that the golden flower has blossomed. There's a lot of light in life, always lighting up everything it touches. And look how interesting, when we see the full moon, every human being looks up at the sky and admires the moon because it's such a beautiful image. It grabs everyone's attention. Everyone wants to look. A person, too, a human being who has that level of light inside, everyone always wants to be around that person because they help light up moments that are often very dark. This is one of the excerpts. I'm going to talk about another one with you guys, which also keeps discussing these confirming experiences. It's a compliment. Moreover, The entire body feels firm and vigorous, unafraid of storms or frost. Things unpleasant to others cannot disturb the clarity of my spirit seed. Yellow gold fills the house, and the steps are of white jade. Rotten and nauseating things on the earth, when touched by a breath of true strength, immediately come to life. Red blood turns to milk. The frail and carnal body becomes pure gold and precious stones. This is the sign that the golden flower crystallizes. This other excerpt really complements this image for us of what this level of wisdom would be for someone who has awakened the golden flower. Look at that. It doesn't fear. It's not afraid of storms or frosts. It means a very deep level of confidence in yourself that can overcome anything life throws at you. Deep down, this confidence in yourself means a confidence in life. It means that the storm and the frost, in other words, the big adversities, they have a role, they have a necessity, because otherwise they wouldn't exist. And since they exist, I also have the ability to find a response to them and know how to give the best response to what life has put in front of me for me to experience. Deep down, this confidence in yourself, this belief that we can find the answers we need, notice that at its core, it's a deep trust in life, that life is logical, not chaotic, and that everything it brings us, I have the opportunity. And I have the chance to develop something to find a deep answer. Because humans came into life not to do a lot of things, but to find deep answers to life. When it mentions here that things unpleasant for others can't disturb the clarity of the seed spirit within me, it means that this person can do many things that others consider impossible, things that are difficult, unpleasant for others. For this person, no, it won't be. It's unshakable. It can't disturb the clarity of the seed spirit, meaning it stays true to itself, doesn't let itself be disturbed, doesn't lose itself, despite external adversities. That's a clear trait of spirituality, not letting yourself be affected by circumstances. When we're getting really affected by everything that happens to us, and my job affects me, traffic affects me, a person who gets irritated irritates me too, it means a low level of spirituality. We're constantly being affected by the outside world, always influenced by circumstances. A deep person, no matter what happens, doesn't stop being themselves. They don't lose their judgment, don't lose their center, even despite the circumstances. Dead things come back to life, and here it talks about several examples of that. It means we have extra energy when we're connected with the spiritual. And everyone, to some extent, can notice this. For example, sometimes when we feel a bit low on energy, a bit tired, but someone needs us and we need to do an act of kindness, like helping someone. We immediately feel it. We feel that we have some extra energy. We connect with kindness. We connect with our heart. This brings a kind of energy to a person that's different from the body's energy, different from physical energy, but it's an inexhaustible source of energy. Well, these are some of the confirming experiences to show us when we are, in some way, getting a little closer to that level of spirituality within ourselves, connecting with our own being, with our own essence. Or when we're just fantasizing about the path. In other words, there are people who think they're growing a lot, but are actually ending up with less energy. People want to be around them less and less. In other words, unlike those confirming experiences we just talked about, anything she comes into contact with in the world makes her lose her center. So it means there's something wrong. They might not be exactly on the path to awakening this golden flower. Well, I hope this talk serves as a source of reflection and can lead each of us to not only understand, but feel, creating practical convictions in our own life experiences. That this great strength of a person comes from a deep connection with our own heart. And everything else in life will just be a consequence of that. Everything else will be added on. The only thing we need to do is connect with ourselves, not lose touch with what we came here to do. We didn't come into this life to do things. We actually came to be ourselves. Thank you all very much.